Bob's running for Georgia State Representative. Good to see Bob. Are there any other elected officials here besides the one that's going to speak today? Haven't missed anybody. All right, great. I want to introduce our speaker right quick. We've been trying to get this guy for 2 years, and he's a very busy individual. It's great to have him here today. We're looking forward to hearing what's going on in his life and our lives that he is directly and indirectly overseeing. So, without further ado, Congressman Tom Graves.
Well, good to join you today. It's always good to sit at the table here and just hear the fellowship and conversation. So much community takes place in meetings such as this. So I appreciate the opportunity to come be with you because it encourages me. Oftentimes I'm in an environment where it's not happy, laughter, conversation. There's conversation, but it's at a different level and with different argumentative tones. Sorry it's taken 2 years to come by, but appreciate your diligence and patience. I know I've been in the region quite a bit lately, and I try to always start off by just sharing with you my a little bit of an apology for not being as available as many of you might would have expected. Life for me is rather crazy, not just really from my job perspective, but from a family perspective. So I'll give you a little background real quick. You may know we have 3 children, John, Janie, and Joanne, and my wife is a school teacher, and I'm a commuter back and forth to D.C. pretty much every week. And we had some challenges this past summer. In that the kids are all on school break during the month of June and July, and that's when we were in D.C. for 9 out of 10 weeks we were in Washington during that same period. And so I sort of made a commitment that I would be home on the weekends with the family because those were the only times they would see me. And all during the week I'm in Washington and they're at home, and so on the weekends I sort of made that commitment, and knowing that the district would respect that and understand that. Where I am in my journey in life right now, the season. And what a remarkable family we have. The 3 kids are really amazing. You've probably met some of them through our time. They're very inclusive in our process and what I do. Real quick on Janie, who's now 12. When I first ran for Congress, Janie was 7.5, 8. So life changes really quick. She's now 12. She does competition cheer. She's in middle school. It's a big deal for her. She's daddy's girl, and we enjoy a lot of good fun times together. She started cross country this year, and she's just a lot of fun. John's 14, freshman in high school, so now I'm going into 2 teenagers. John's 14, Joanne being 15, going on 16. John, freshman, plays football, runs track, loves life, and he wants to grow up. When you ask him, what do you want to go to college to be? He'd say, I want to be an entrepreneur. Whatever that is, right? Because he thinks innovatively. He's a creator. He has a great imagination. He recently just used his money and purchased this device which allows you to take what they call a breadboard and circuitry, and then take the laptop and program it to do a little program, and he'll come back up the steps and he'll say, "Hey guys, look at what I've done here." And there'll be like 2 lights flashing, alternating, different colors. He's like, I got 50 lines of code and entered it in. And so that's his mind, he's just so innovative and so excited about the opportunity in technology and what you can do. Imagine that, a young mind such as that, just trying to create something, do something. But his great accomplishment this year was in triathlons. He over a year ago started doing triathlons, and this year he finished 6th in his age group in the USAT Nationals in Ohio, which was a great accomplishment for him, and a very, you'd be surprised how competitive triathlons are for youth. And then Joanne, the oldest, the first. Yesterday was one of those bittersweet days for me as a dad. We spent most of our day, and the bitter part was not where we spent it, but the reason why we spent it there. We were at the University of Georgia as she's beginning to make decisions about her future. And now, I mentioned she's only 15, about to be 16, not even driving yet. She's a sophomore, but she's so driven. She's one of the top in her class. She knows what she wants to do in life, and I mean, she's got it forecasted out for the next 35, 40 years. and so far ahead of where I was when I was her age. In fact, yesterday I shared with her that my first thoughts of college were in about the last 2 months of high school when I didn't even know what it was. It was a teacher saying, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "What is it?" I thought, high school, 12, you were done and you were out and you were gone. And now you're saying I have to go back and study and do this again. I'm not for that. But she's so far ahead, and so we had that time together. She's looking forward to turning 16, getting her license. She thinks that's when it occurs because that's state law. But then we have daddy's law in the house. It may be a little bit later than that. So that's our life, our family. And of course, Julie's teaching 3rd grade this year. And so it's been busy, so I appreciate your patience. But a lot's been going on in the world, as you can imagine. You've seen it on the news. Very, very complicated world environment we have right now. In essence, the world's on fire in a lot of different reasons, for a lot of different reasons, a lot of different places. And then you have a politically charged election cycle here combining with all of it. And I hope that this election cycle does not in any way impact decisions that are necessary, that have to be made, with some of the decisions that are required to be made here in the next couple of weeks, if not months, that they are made for the right reasons, and the reasons being for our national defense, our national security, and the American people, and doing the right thing. But I spent the first week of August in Israel. And it was a time when it was Hamas was sending missiles into Israel. It was pre-ceasefire, it was during the ceasefire, it was post-ceasefire. And I was the co-chair of the event. Steve Israel, who's a Democrat from New York, was the Democrat chair. There were 6 Democrats, 3 Republicans. And it was a working trip, and where we were there to, share our support for Israel and on behalf of the House of Representatives. And an awfully politically charged environment in the House, very partisan at times. There's unity when it comes to our support and defense of Israel and the Israeli people from the terrorists that surround them and want to see them annihilated and pushed into the Mediterranean. But it was a trip in which we learned so much. I met with Benjamin Netanyahu, met with the Israeli Defense Force leaders, generals, colonels, with opposition leaders in their government who generally are opposed to the prime minister, but who support their efforts to defend themselves and their obligation to do that at this point. So an amazing time, but while we're there, you have the opportunity to witness a civil war going on in Syria, just to the north. You go to the Golan Heights, and literally there would be a cloud of dust go up in the air, and then you'd hear the concussion from mortars going off just right there north. And then just to the northwest is you have Lebanon with Hezbollah, and then you have Jordan, and then certainly just to the east of Jordan you have Iran, and then the Gaza Strip and Hamas. Very, very unstable environment. Not a place where those are not the neighbors you desire, quite frankly, if you think about it. If you're a nation, a country, a people, that's not who you desire to have as neighbors, because they just don't like you. The Hamas leaders, they're part of the Palestinians, not really part of the PLO, but they're trying to represent that group or that voice. I'd say that's not unanimous over there. I would say that there is a large movement by the Palestinians to have peace, to have a 2-state recognition of Israel and Palestinians. But yet you have terrorists that do what terrorists are described as in their own name. They want to terrorize. They have no purpose, no plan other than to scare or invoke fear in people. And there's no greater good in their thoughts or their actions. And in fact, they're just sending missiles just to send missiles, because they're just not, for whatever reason that day, they just want to launch missiles knowing that they're going to get return fire, and there's going to be a defense that's amazing coming from Israel. Hamas has stated objectives in their formation, that is to do away with the Jewish people, that's to do away with the recognition of Israel whatsoever. And when you realize that's what's happened over there, that's the environment over there, and then you mix in now what we know is the Islamic State on top of that, and then you have some sleepers still there with Iran and others, you wonder, where does all of this lead? And this is such an important time in our history as a nation, as to what do we do, how do we respond, how do we react. And then you go just a little bit further around the globe, and you have Putin, you have Russia moving into Ukraine, Crimea, and other areas. And you wonder what happens in North Korea. You see some other things that are occurring in other areas there. There's a lot of instability across the world right now, and the only way to bring stability to this unstable environment is for America to stand up and lead. This is, if there's ever been a time in which we as a country can step back and look at how important it is that we are active and involved in the world, now is that time. Because when we have been removed, whether it's from Iraq, whether it's from Afghanistan, whether it's from other areas, it is clear that the void is filled by the bad guys. And so it's very important that we regain that strength, that perception across the world that we are a force to be reckoned with, and that we will enforce good throughout the world. Doesn't mean we got to be the police. Doesn't mean we have to be involved in every situation. But the bad characters need to know that when it's time to get involved, we will, and we will come with a mighty army behind us. And so a lot of things are on the forefront. I wish I could give you a clear picture of what it'll look like in the next several weeks or months, but I think that what we're going to see is a very long, drawn-out process trying to reach a resolution, particularly with the Islamic State, for a couple of reasons. One, the administration has one viewpoint in how to work through this, and Republicans, quite frankly, have a different viewpoint, and that is that you have to be strong, you have to be forceful, and you take it to them. The administration's policies are a little bit more removed. The red lines are sort of brought to our beaches or to our borders, and this is evident by the pullout from Iraq and not forcing stronger negotiations there to maintain our presence in Iraq, and keeping our supplies, our ammo, and providing the continued training that was being provided. So this is a time where we're going to have to reconcile those differences. We took a step towards that right before this recess we're in adopting a funding mechanism for the government to keep the government open, no government shutdown. You don't notice that this time of year. Last year at this time, we were in a government shutdown for the first 17 days of October. But in this funding measure, it provided for a couple of different things that the president asked for. You'll remember his speech to the nation had 4 points of his strategy that had been formulated just moments and days after he said there was no strategy. So this has been sort of cobbled together rather rapidly from their perspective. And one of those was training and aiding the Syrian rebels to be the ground forces in that region, in addition to additional airstrikes and some other items. And those are all what I would refer to as necessary steps. It's a good start, but that's not all that's going to be necessary or involved. And in fact, it was General Dempsey, the Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman, who said those are all necessary steps, but insufficient. And that comes from the president's own chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff. So that should tell us something, that more is to come, more is to be expected, if the objective and the goal is to rid ourselves of the threat of Islamic State. So this is a threat. I think that has been agreed to by everyone involved, that the Islamic State is a threat to our way of life, to the American people, and in fact, you've had the beheading of the American journalist and continued threats across the globe in other areas. So this is a threat that we as a nation are going to have to deal with, and deal with very, very well. Thinking about additional threats, y'all have experienced some, and I'll shift gears. This is not say the external threats like we've described across the world, but you've seen it from a business community. In essence, regulatory threats, EPA threats, the government inclusion in your everyday lives is trying to operate a business. This has been a challenge for our economy. We're coming back. Things are moving in the right direction, but I'd say that is in spite of what government has done to small business owners across our country, for the difficulty and the challenges that have been laid in the way of the business owners. And you're to be commended for that. You've done an amazing job to push through these last 5 and 6 years. Have not been easy whatsoever. And that would be heightened even more in this area, where you've seen it in this region, how much we have seen and witnessed with the challenges of the economy. But moving in the right direction, and depending on the political environment as we come out of November, we'll see how things move forward. But I suspect what we've noticed is that there's been a slowdown of a lot of the policies coming out of the administration. From a normal legislative process, there's been an acceleration coming out of the agency process, the rules, the regulations. Leaves a lot of folks wondering what to do next. That uncertainty does not help the economic environment whatsoever. So we hope that that'll just simmer down a little bit, and that in essence a timeout. That the administration, the House and the Senate all say, you know what, let's let businesses do what they do best, and that's create jobs, hire individuals, come up with their good, their product or service, whatever it is, and enjoy the American dream. That's what the focus should be. It's not a government that creates jobs. It's the government that enables an environment to allow you to create the jobs that I think our next focus should be. So this is going to be the next, I'm sure the next couple of weeks you'll watch with great anticipation as to who the leaders are in the Senate and this and that, and that is if you're paying attention to what's going on, but there seems to be a lot of focus on what happens in the Senate. And to lower expectations, please let me do that. There's still a divided Washington politically, regardless if Republicans take the Senate. And when I say divided Washington, sometimes I don't mean divided because it's Republicans and Democrats. It's divided in the Republican Party, and it's divided in the Democrat Party as well. So there's a lot of different divisions that occur, and I would say it's not for the wrong reasons. I think everybody has the same objectives. They have the same goals. It's how you get there seems to be the challenge amongst both parties and the legislative branch and the executive branch. We have different visions potentially and different routes of achieving those. But regardless of the elections that occur in November, we still, it'll be a slow, methodical process, I believe, which is good. It is good because when you have a very quick, forceful process, you end up with bad policy. And many would point to the healthcare law as an example of that, and you could probably point to Republican ideas that have been done the same way. It is good to have deliberation, both parties involved and all regions of the country involved, and that way you get the best product. It's not going to be the what we like the most, and it's not going to be what somebody else likes the most, but it's going to be something in which there is agreement and joint ownership in what that is. And so my hope is that as we come out of these elections, that's the environment that we end up in. So I know we're going to take some questions. There may be some, but I'll reference the government shutdown. And I'll share with you the most challenging moment I had it really as being a father was last year, and it was during the government shutdown. I was heavily involved in that debate. I was very involved in trying to protect my constituents from the harmful effects of what I see as a very bad law. And so there was a great debate around that ultimately led to the shutdown, and everybody will point fingers as to who was responsible. And had it been good in public polls and opinion for one group, they'd all take credit for it. When it's bad, then everybody points fingers. So everybody should take credit for it because nobody found a solution through it. However, on October 5th of last year, two important key dates for me. It was my anniversary, it was one, which Julie and I just celebrated our 18th anniversary last week, or I guess Sunday. But last year, so it was a Saturday, it was October 5th. Anniversary was very important, and I did the things that a husband should do, hopefully, and remembered. I'm sure I didn't give all the gifts I should have or sent the flowers. I mean, I'm sort of embroiled in this government shutdown, but I'm stuck in Washington. It's shut down. There's really no staff. Everybody's, nobody can get paid, so nobody can work, and nobody could volunteer. It was really a strange time. So I'm in my office, and the second most important thing about that day was it was Joanne's first homecoming dance day, and I was to be her date. That was our plan. I was going to take her to the dance. I was going to be the dad that sort of washed the truck, cleaned it up, dressed up real nice, put on the tux, and went out to dinner and did the whole embarrass your daughter kind of thing, and just be really the knight in shining armor of that day. Well, I couldn't make it, obviously, and I had to deal with, well, do I fly home and fulfill that obligation and then fly back or not? And I made the decision I couldn't. I was in the middle of this, and I was one of the leading voices in what was occurring, and I had a responsibility to stay until an agreement was reached. And so I had to make the call that day, and it was to Joanne, and I called, and she answered, and I had to present her corsage over the phone. And it was one of those corsages that go on the wrist, and that was a real tough thing for me to do. So I practiced my little speech. I'm standing in my office, nobody's there, it's just me. And I gave my little speech, and my daughter is very, very strong-willed and very independent. Really, the first time I've sensed her ever getting emotional. But she understood. And I'll never forget her saying, Dad, it's okay. It's okay. Because I know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing right now. And you're doing it because you care about me. I was like, wow. So she took the toughest day of my life and turned it into a positive, because she knew, regardless of everybody's opinion on something, our intent was good. It was good, and it was for her. And that she could go to that dance with her friends and know that her dad was fighting the fight on behalf of them and their future and their generation. So, toughest day turned into one of the best days. And as I reminded her, as you go through the homecoming dance, just look down at that corsage and know I'm with you. Every time you see it, I'm with you, and I'll be home soon. So, that was last year, October 5th, and here we are 1 year later. What a difference a year makes. Thanks for letting me join you. I'll be happy to take any questions, but thank you for what you do here in this area. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned the terrorist attacks abroad, but we have terrorist attacks taking place right here on our soil. We've had a beheading here in our country, and it's being called workplace violence. What's being done about that?
No, that you bring up a great point, and that is a concern about really what does take place here and how is it defined, and whether it's Fort Hood, whether it's what occurred in Oklahoma, and those are fair questions. I don't know the answer to that as to what it should be defined or not defined, and I'm real careful not to jump to conclusions, and I have an obligation not to do that. But I do know that an answer needs to be found on that, and I would say what suggests what you're saying is that the fact that the local police department concluded the FBI based on things they had discovered and people they'd interviewed and found, that apparently there's more to it than a workplace violence.
Yes. I don't think we can effectively handle it if we politically correctly, label it something that it's not.
Right.
It won't be handled and continue.
We should not turn our head whatsoever, and in fact, we need to be taking further precautions to provide a sense of security that things like this are not acceptable, and to the best that we can prevent it will not occur. But you bring up another point I didn't address, and that is it is known that there are over 100 United States citizens who have left our country and joined the Islamic State, a terrorist organization, known enemy of the United States, and have either returned or not returned. Some returned and went back, and in fact one left here, trained, came back to Florida, and then was a suicide bomber in another country. That I do know is at the top of the list and on the radar, and they're very well aware of those individuals. Yes, ma'am.
Sort of piggyback on that. What about really was a small headline, but a headline about the people coming in at our borders in Texas from Mexico just the other day that are supposed to be in the ISIS group.
Right, and I don't know if that's been confirmed or not, so I'll be cautious not to really respond. But I do know that based on what occurred over the summer, which was really a 12-month cycle that occurred, where you had young unaccompanied minors from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, I believe were the three, who could track that distance and cross our border, should cause alarm that a 13-year-old female can make that journey and do that, could not someone else who has ill intentions. And this is where there's a stark contrast in debate in Washington about national security. I don't see border security as an immigration issue. I see it as a national security issue.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate that politically it gets, joined together, because it is not whatsoever. And so anyone who supports border security, whether it's on southern border, northern border, or on either coast, should not be labeled as one who is anti-immigration or a bigot or any. That is not the case. And in fact, it's about protecting and defending the citizens of this country, which is the main obligation of the federal government.
Well, it scares me because back on 9/11, they said whether it starts hitting home, and it is, and that's what's scary.
Mm-hmm. And what we as a country, as a people, need to not allow to happen, and that is fear. These terrorist groups, that's what they thrive on. Their success is when we're scared, and we have to be strong. We have to be strong, and we have to be. I mean, do we know we have threats as a country? Yes. We have folks who hate our freedom, they hate our way of life, they hate our belief system, our religion, our economy, all those kind of things. Envy and hatred. But in no way should that impede our way of life. And I think about Israel. When I was there, they're under attack. A couple hundred mortars a day going into Israel. They have the Iron Dome. They do their part. They defend themselves, and then they strike back. But I took a picture, and I presented this to a high school class. I gave them a slideshow on my trip to Israel and what's going on in the Middle East. And I closed with this because I didn't want them to think that it's a region in which people live in fear. The last slide I showed them was a picture of the Mediterranean with over 100 surfers in it on a day in which missiles were being launched in Israel. They get up every day, go to work, do their stuff, go to school, they surf, they get on with their life every day, knowing that their threats exist, but they don't live in fear. Yes, ma'am.
I've read some bits and pieces about our Marine that's been in Mexico for 7 months being poorly treated. I saw that his congressman and some other congressmen were working with the Mexican authorities to hopefully have him released soon, that he's got PTSD. Is there something being done with Congress to have him released? Because we have hundreds of thousands of people who have come here illegally that get to stay and get all kinds of benefits, yet he mistakenly went across the border with 3 guns and has been in jail for 6 months. So it's kind of a contradictory thing there. I'm encouraged that some congressmen have been working for his release, but do you know if it's getting close to him being able to?
I don't know the update on that, but you're right. There is an active effort to reach an agreement, a conclusion. But the broader point you bring up is that Mexico has stronger enforcement laws than we do. As a country.
They shuttle their people into our
Right.
country, but then we can't send one person over there.
And ownership too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
If only-
and
and
I'm
of course
a
it's
mother,
all-
and I worry about diseases coming across the border as well. Like you have people that are not vaccinated or whatever, which there's plenty in America that don't vaccinate, but there's no telling. We had a mystery respiratory disease going around our country this year, and who's to say that some of it's not from not having a secure border?
Yeah, secure border is so important, and for so many different reasons, and so given the new threats, and you hate that might be the impetus to do the right thing, but maybe it helps build that argument that hey, there is a reason for this. It's not about immigration reform. There's other reasons that we need a secure border. Yes, sir.
Well, what would you say the biggest challenge you face personally in serving Congressman and serving your area down here?
Biggest challenge. Well, so I would think, I probably think in 3 silos. You have personal, you have policy, and you have political silos. It's a great challenge as a father to be away from your kids quite a bit. But we have an understanding, and they know that's what I've been called to do. And we blend that together very well. I spend a lot of time with them. They're included in a lot of things. In fact, I failed to mention that yesterday one of the greatest things in our state in a long time occurred as far as economic development. It was the signing of the PPA agreement for the port, of which I participated in, and it was an active, very involved effort by everyone, all parties, local, state, federal, Republican, Democrat, everybody. But my daughter went with me to that. It was a way for me to include her in my day, and then as well, then go from there and meet, go see University of Georgia. She hasn't visited that with me and such, and so we sort of blend. So that's a challenge, is how do you blend the family. Political is political. It's in the world of high-speed information, internet, truth, not truth, rumor. It's hard to stay in front of that, and so you have to be very, very good about the information that you share, and then also being able to respond to things that maybe aren't necessarily factual, and which does occur, in case you didn't know that. Everything on the internet is not true. Yeah, including about you and me and everyone else. And then the policy side of it is decisions are tough. They're not all easy at all. And so sometimes and when you speak to, I was in the Georgia House, and you have 3 buttons on your machine there, and it was the red, the green, and then there was yellow in the middle. And whenever I'd speak to youth, they always thought yellow was maybe. There is no maybe button in this stuff. And every time I cast a vote, it's 300 million people being impacted. So, and sometimes they're not easy, and they don't necessarily match up with what your constituents think you should do. But based on the information you have and the facts you have to make the most informed decision you can. So, typical challenges like that. Yeah. For North Georgia country boy like me, that's a lot to juggle, I can tell you. Yes.
Yes, sir. When you first became congressman for this district, you came to Paulding County, and one of the statements that struck me when I interviewed you then was you said, "I do not believe in compromise." You sound a lot more mellow today. Would you comment on how Congress has changed you?
I wouldn't say Congress has changed me. I would hope that maybe I've changed it just a bit, if I had to look at the two. I would say you don't compromise principle. Now, preferences, yeah. Greatest illustration of that is building a home. You can't compromise the foundation, but the color of the walls, yeah, let's have, I might like blue, and my wife might like green, but there's no reason to bring the whole house down. And so I would say that the one thing that I have, and no one presses in the room, I'm okay with telling you I have matured through the process to understand there's a difference between principle and preference. And sometimes it's not as easy to detect, but there are differences. And when you can identify those, you stick to your principle. And one day your district may not agree with your principles, and they'll have to find somebody new. But preferences are something that can be, that's debatable, that's discussed. Anything else? No, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Tom. That was very informative.